How about we talk Final Fantasy X? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Batman Drew podcast. This is our review of Final Fantasy X. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. I grew up watching my older brother play the games. My first introductory to Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII, as it was to a lot of people. And I really loved the story arcs of each of the games as I watched my brother play 7, as I attempted, as a kid, to play 8. But Final Fantasy X was the first one that I really immersed myself with, and that I really went full in as a kid to try to play and beat. And I did not. I did not have the patience to level up and to get my characters to where they needed to be in order to, ultimately defeat Sin in that game. So here I am. I came back 20-something odd years later and said, okay, I want to complete this game. I want to beat it. So let me give it another stab. So obviously, as an adult, clearly I know the need for patience on these kind of games. So it wasn't near as hard this time around as it was originally. But Final Fantasy X, I gotta tell you, still holds up after 20-something years. First of all, the graphics aren't even that dated. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not pristine, but for a 25-year-old game, the graphics are actually pretty good. I was kind of shocked revisiting it, just how much the graphics really didn't take me out of the game, because I'm the kind of guy that I prefer better graphics. Like, playing retro games or dated games are kind of hard for me sometimes just because of how poor the graphics are. But I thought the graphics really held up. But ultimately, the overview of the game, I'm sure you've played it. If you're watching this video, I'm sure you have. But if you haven't, this will be a little bit of spoiler. The overview of the game follows Tidus, who is a blitzball player for the Xanargan Apes, and he is kind of more or less time travels to the future in a world that is kind of regressed in their way of technology and the use of machinery and things like that, as part of a religious idealism. And so he washes up on shore after time traveling into the future, which ultimately ends up being a dream, I guess. But so he time travels into the future to help Yuna, one of the summoners, basically a priest or priestess or of her world, to go on her pilgrimage in order to obtain all the Aeons that it'll take to be able to summon the final Aeon and defeat Sin. The story of Final Fantasy X is really more of a story about bucking the religious norms and not confining to tradition. And I think why that resonated with me so much when I was kind of growing up, and why it resonates to me now as an adult, is because I grew up with a super religious background. And I remember I was 16, and I remember sitting in church service, and the pastor that we had at the time, he was preaching and reading out of the Bible, and he had the words written up on screen. As most churches do, they put up the verse on that the preacher's reading. But I remember looking around and realized that no one in the building had a Bible on them. And we were just taking what this guy had to say for gold. We weren't questioning it one bit. And in the world of Spira and Final Fantasy X, it's kind of the same thing. So you meet Wakka as soon as you wash up on shore. He's the first character you meet in this new world of Spira. And Wakka is a religious nut. He is like, this is tradition. We're gonna do things by the book, right? Um, and his story arc and journey through it really resonated with me, because at the end of it, he starts to question everything that he's believed in before in the past, and realize that it's time for him to find out the truth on his own. And I just think that that message kind of gets missed, and it's weird that it does, because it's a tip on the nose. Like the big bad is sin. That's what they call it, is sin, right? And sin comes to basically destroy Spira. And through the course of Yuna's pilgrimage, she finds out just how corrupt the Church of Yevon truly is. And how often nowadays do we hear about religious scandals and things like that going on in the church, no matter what denomination you are. The fact that I grew up in church, and I can tell you horror stories of the way that young adults were treated, and children, and even older adults, and some of the shit that went on just in the churches that I've been a part of. And so for this to really kind of, I guess, question that, I think for a lot of people, I think either they didn't realize the kind of point of the story, or they glossed over it intentionally because they didn't want to hear the message that was behind it. But of all the Final Fantasy games that I've ever played, this one really stuck hard to that message. Like, it was almost preachy the other way, and denying the faith and the church. But ultimately, I think that its message at its heart was just the fact that you don't have to be who everyone tells you have to be, whether it's through religion or occupation or whatever. Like, you can set out your own path, and you can create your own story. And that's what you see with Tidus. And Tidus is the whiniest character I think I've ever met in any genre or medium of content. The only character I might think might be more of a baby is Deku from My Hero Academia. I couldn't even watch that show because of that character. But Tidus, he does have a nice story arc, because he obviously throughout the course of the game, if you've played it, he's wrestling with not only trying to understand this new world, and everything's so foreign to him, but the dude's dealing with daddy issues. Like, his dad left when he was real young. And again, that's a thing that I can relate to. My dad passed away when I was a kid. And so for me, I guess this story just kind of hit home in a lot of different ways. So aside from just how it affected me personally as a gamer, I just remember when I first played this game, and the fact that the characters talked. I didn't have to read all the dialogue. Like, that was a game changer for me anyways, because I'm not really dyslexic, but I have really shitty reading comprehension. I have to read something over and over and over again in order to finally retain it. So the fact that I didn't have to read the dialogue anymore was huge for me as enjoying the game just in general. But also, there was a lot of things about this game that were game changers for the genre. The sphere grid, for example, was something new and very complex, and ultimately allowed you to be able to customize your characters if you wanted to. I think throughout the course of this replay, I stuck to just the normal path, and I think it served me well, because I think that it allowed me to be able to bring my characters along nicely throughout the course of the game without having to worry about trying to be overpowered. I didn't finish the sphere grid by any means, but I think I got my characters to a reasonable amount of power without having to like overgrind on the character development. But I think with the nice part about this game that I'm sure has involved in other Final Fantasy games, I just can't really recall right now, was just the customization of your armor and of your weapons that allowed for certain things like SOS haste and things like that. I can't tell you how many times that honestly saved my ass was the fact that with SOS haste, when you got too low of HP, then obviously you inflicted haste upon yourself to be able to speed up your turns. And that's another game changer too. The ticker, right? That really showed you what turns your characters took so that you could really strategize and plan out what you were going to do in the game. As a kid, again, I just didn't have the patience for it, but now I can truly appreciate just how great that turn-based style was, and how great that ticker was to be able to kind of see, who was going next, and you can kind of strategize and plan out, right? And it also really helps with the development of the characters, because your characters only have to do one thing in battle in order to gain that AP. And so being able to move characters around and not be able to take significant damage and things like that, because I knew whose turn it was going to be and everything, like that really came as a huge part of my strategy. So for the game itself, again, I really enjoyed the storyline. I think that it did a great job of really helping, from a real world perspective, to encourage you to be yourself and not conform, and tell you that it's okay to question things, right? From a video game perspective, I thought the game itself was very intriguing. The storyline I thought was intriguing from a gaming aspects perspective. I thought the character developments and the character arts were great. Some of the characters I could have done away with. Kimahri was very underutilized in this game. Even when I played, I rarely ever put him in battle. It just wasn't great. Like, if I was going to use anybody as kind of that tank, it was going to be Wakka or Auron. And so Kimahri, I felt, was kind of I don't know, just wasn't needed a whole lot. I ended up using Lulu a lot, obviously, because of her magic ability. But Yuna being the only one who could summon, that was probably something I really didn't care for in the game. I didn't like the fact that she was the only one who could summon. I understood why, because of the storyline, and that's, her pilgrimage and things like that. But I found myself a little frustrated sometimes, wanting to build up my Aeons, but obviously having to only be able to do that with Yuna. So from that aspect, I guess that was a little tedious, if I'm being honest. But all in all, I thought the fighting aspect of this game was really good. And right now I'm going through and trying to do the same thing with Final Fantasy 13, because it was a game I had started as a kid and never finished. And it really makes me appreciate that turn-based style fighting, because right now through Final Fantasy 13, although I'm very early on, and I feel like I'm just button mashing, and there's not a lot of the strategy behind it, but I'm committed to playing. I'm sure that it's going to get better. I'm only about 5 to 10 hours into the game, so I'm sure it's going to get better. But back to Final Fantasy 10. The storyline I loved. The fighting aspect of the game I thought was really good. The character arcs, I thought for the most part, a lot of them had nice character arcs. Again, Kimahri, I could have, whatever. That's fine. You find out his story. Excuse me, my dog's barking. You find out his story is really driven on the fact that he was, kind of picked on as a kid, and he was hornless and all that kind of stuff. So, but Yuna was the main character, right? I know Tidus is the cover character, but this was Yuna's story, and I felt like Yuna was an amazing character who had a great development arc, and ultimately, I really just I loved every aspect of her. I thought that she was a phenomenal character, and although I'm not going to play the sequel, just didn't really care for the way that looked, even though I've heard it's actually pretty good. I've really kind of grown to be fond of Yuna. I actually think that if I had to really rank my favorite Final Fantasy characters, I think she would be top 3 in that. So let's talk about a couple of things that I didn't particularly like about the game. I think the main character that I found just repulsive, and it was sad because I think he could have really set up to be a great villain. Was Seymour. It was kind of a creep, like not in a like I'm a bad guy, I want to take over the world type of way, but more of like a pedophile, creepy dude kind of way. I mean, because Yuna, I don't know how old the game is saying Yuna is. I'm sure she's probably, equivalent to 18, right, in our world. But it just came across as like, I'm an old man, let me, have this young girl type vibe, especially when he was wanting to marry her for the sake of the church in Spira. Um, and so I guess in that aspect, that kind of fits in that religious, you know, I guess norm cult like, mentality. So, but ultimately, I just found the villain to be a little bit lackluster. I mean, the story definitely revolved around the journey for Titus and Yuna and the rest of the gang. Um, but ultimately, like towards the end of the game, who was the villain? Who was the real bad guy? Was it Seymour? Was it Unalesca? Was it Jet? Spoiler, I guess. Jet is Titus's dad, who is the reincarnation of Sin. Um, and ultimately, I know the game ends with defeating Sin, so I guess that's obviously the real bad guy. But Seymour should have had a better role. It should have been portrayed better, and so I think that was the biggest letdown and disappointment. I hate when games don't flush out the villain arc, and I just felt like this one was a little bit choppy and just wasn't worth it. The thing that I absolutely loved the most about the game, by far, was the music. I think that Yuna's theme song is up there for me next to Aerith's theme song. I think that I'm going to never not hear her music and not instantly be thrust back into the world of Spira and her journey. But the Xanarkin theme song, I was flying. Oh, I was in the middle of the game, and I was flying from San Diego back home to Oklahoma. And as I was going through the airport, I hear a piano playing, and they had an open piano in the airport in San Diego that anyone could just go up to play to be able to, entertain the people in the airport and things like that. And as I'm walking, I'm like, is that really and it was a guy that was playing the Xanarkin theme on piano, and I instantly, like, first of all, it was just cool the fact that I was replaying the game, and here's this guy playing this theme song 25 years later after the game's come out. But I just, it took me straight to Spira. Like, I think that the music in this game is just so iconic. And right now, as I go to work out in the mornings, that's what I'm listening to as I'm doing cardio. I'm listening to the Final Fantasy X album. And this is a guy who absolutely loves the Final Fantasy VII music. Like, I think Aerith's theme is amazing. Sephiroth's theme, the one-winged warrior, I think is what the title of it is. Sephiroth's theme is so epic. But just something about the music in Final Fantasy X just is not only, again, it just immerses me right back into that world, but it's so calming and it's so easy to listen to. So for me, the biggest win of this game was by far the music. So look, at the end of the day, this game held up 25 years later. I was happy that I replayed it. I think that it'll probably be one that I replay again in the future. Maybe as my son gets a little bit older, I introduce him to Final Fantasy X and that world. And if you haven't played it, or if you haven't visited it in a while, I think it's worth a replay. I really do. I think that it holds up. And again, I don't ever plan on playing Final Fantasy X-2. I just have zero interest in that game, especially because I hear like it. The story arc of Yuna, she really kind of comes into her own to be her own person, and that's great, right? Like, again, we're talking about not conforming to religious norms and traditions, but to me, her story was so perfect in Final Fantasy X. I just have no desire to continue. Like, I want to preserve everything in that world. So I think this is where my Final Fantasy X ends, is just with this game. But I would love a remake of this game 10 years from now. I think if you could still carry the tone of the game, but improve obviously on the graphics and allow Blitzball to be more sports game driven based of what games are now, and not the way that it was set up necessarily in the game. I think Blitzball could be something that'd be really fun to be able to revisit. So yeah, just my overall thoughts of this game. It takes me away back to Spirit every time that I think of it. And I gotta tell y'all, the Final Fantasy VII is still my favorite. I think Final Fantasy X, after replaying it, has moved into probably my top 10 video games of all time. And so definitely rewatch it or replay it, or hell, rewatch it. I'm sure you can find all the cutscenes on YouTube. But in a thumbs up, thumbs down world, it's definitely a thumbs up for me.